All right, we're live here, getting this going. So, hello, good morning, everyone.
Hello.
We're so excited to be here today. Another Money Monday.
Yes.
Let me make sure everyone's seeing this. Share it, get
Maggie
it going.
has, like system control. I say when I watch her do this, I feel like she's landing a plane somewhere. She's clicking and looking. But today we want to welcome Michelle Lawless, which I think is so interesting that you have that last name, being an attorney. I bet people say that a lot to you, right?
All the time.
Well, they're not going to forget your name, that's for sure. Yeah. So we come to this group every Monday at 10:30 because we want to share the Purse Strings message, which is for women to be financially fearless. And Purse Strings was created so that women had access to free online tools and resources they could use to make smart financial decisions for themselves and for their families. And as we navigate our life, we go through lots of different transitions. Some like Maggie, high potential earners, leaving school and heading into the workforce. She has different financial situations in terms of maybe buying a condo or maybe at some point getting married, having children than some of us do in our 50s, which is more like, you know, maybe we're still working, maybe we're thinking about retirement. I know in my 50s, I went through a divorce, and today we're going to be navigating the gray divorce. And of course, we've heard about the most popular gray divorce that's happening right this minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
The gays. Who knew, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know what's happening in people's families. They've been married a long time, very successful couple, children. And, you know, when you're navigating divorce or contemplating divorce, you think, can I do this? What are going to be the rippling impacts of my family? How do I tell people? But Michelle's going to share some information about navigating a gray divorce, and she'll explain kind of what we mean by gray divorce as well. But I just want to add that Michelle is one of our Purse Strings approved professionals. So at Purse Strings, not only do we provide you free online tools and resources, we bring to women top tier financial professionals, all things financial, we say. So if you're navigating a divorce, if you're buying a house, if you're needing auto insurance for your car, anything that's financial, you need life insurance, or you want to maybe start budgeting your money better, we have money coaches. We have a cadre of top tier financial professionals who we consider or call Purse Strings approved professionals that are at your, a part of your financial team, right? There's no one financial person you need all the way along, but you do need a team of women or men that are professionals in their area of expertise. So right on pursestrings.co, you will see a whole cadre of Purse Strings approved professionals that you can navigate, take a look through, and see if you need someone to do some business with. They're there for you. How's that, Maggie? Did I cover everything?
Great intro. You got it down. You got it down pat.
Good.
I feel like you've done this before.
A few times.
Right. Let me give a little intro to Michelle, and then we'll give you the floor. So Michelle Lawless is the founder of her law firm, the Office of Michelle A. Lawless, LLC in Chicago. Her passion for helping clients through difficult and complex situations was the reason she entered the field of family law over 20 years ago. At all turns, she provides result-oriented counsel with the utmost empathy and integrity. While she gained a reputation as a fierce advocate and litigator, she now focuses her practice on the use of mediation and collaboration in lieu of stress and expensive court battles, in order to assist her clients to resolve the matters. So it's pretty awesome and a great way to go about it, we think. But we'd love to hear more about you and the Great Divorce. So we'll give you the floor.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And okay. Maggie, if you want to go to the next slide, that's fine. So It's so great to be here with everyone. I love this idea of purse strings, which is kind of this amazing network, for lack of a better word, of approved providers for women. Women really do need to kind of have their own advisors for a lot of different things in life. And I'll be talking about gray divorce today and providers that, you know, people should be thinking about, whether you're thinking about going through a divorce or someone that you care about. So, or if you're a trusted advisor tuning into this, something that you would want to, some things you want to consider. And I will talk a little bit about the divorce that's in the news when we get to a few little bit later on. But what is a gray divorce? So Maggie, you can go to the next slide. The first, I did some research on when did we start using that term. It seems like there was a New York Times article way back in 1982, which actually first coined the term, which I was surprised that it went back that far. I think it's seeped a little bit more into the mainstream in the last several years. And in the beginning, and like back in 1982, this New York Times article really talked about just grandparents that were going through a divorce. And, you know, it was a very unique situation. You didn't hear a lot about couples getting divorced in their 60s and 70s back in 1982. Fast forward to the year 2021, and I think people more think of the gray divorce as couples in their 50s and beyond, people that are nearing retirement, they're retired already, their grandparents, empty nesters, even people that kind of have some children in college and maybe one at home still, or one left in college, and some adult children that are kind of making their way on their own pretty early on in their careers. So you can go to the next slide, Maggie. So how is a gray divorce different? So I'm going to talk about two different aspects of a divorce case. And I talk about this with everyone, whether or not they're going through a gray divorce or they're younger and they have young children and they're going through a divorce. It's really important to understand that there are two aspects to every divorce case. There's the legal aspect and the emotional aspect. And when you talk about the legal aspect and the emotional aspect as a professional, I can very clearly delineate the two in my mind. For clients, it is impossible, rightfully so. This is a very difficult time that people are going with, and you're having to get legal advice, financial advice, possibly estate planning advice if you are an older couple. And you may be hearing some of these terms for the first time. And then there's the tremendous emotional impact. And those two things collide during a case at all times. And it's important that both of those aspects of a case be honored and that you're servicing both aspects of those. Lawyers are hired to deal with the legal aspects of the case. And I'm not a trained therapist. None of us are. Some divorce lawyers think that they have an honorary graduate degree in psychology because if you've done this long enough, you definitely have to be in tune with people's psychology and what they're going through. But I think it's very important, and I always tell my clients, you need to get that emotional support outside of the legal process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Maggie, you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk now about the legal issues of a gray divorce. There's some good news in terms of the gray divorce when you are kind of narrowing the issues, because divorce with an older couple the issues are much more contained. Typically, we don't have parenting and child-related parenting issues. You may have some lingering financial issues related to your adult children or your college-age children, but the issues really are what I call party-centric, meaning that we are going to be looking at what the parties need in order to move on to the next phase of their life. When I represent a mom who's in her 30s, 40s, she's got kids at home. That is a child-centric divorce most of the time. We have to craft a parenting agreement. We have to figure out how the children's needs are going to be met. And then we have to kind of long-term plan for college. And then on top of that, we have to divide assets and do all the things that you have to do in a divorce. So in some ways, the gray divorce, it's not easier. I'm not going to say it's easier because every divorce is hard, but the issues are more contained. So the issues are going to be whether or not maintenance would be awarded and the allocation of assets. Those are going to be the two main issues that you're going to deal with in a divorce case where children are not having to be the focus. And in that allocation of assets, we're going to have to be looking at things like retirement assets. Those are treated a little as, those are treated a little bit differently for tax purposes. So we have to look at retirement assets. We have to look at what type of insurance is going to be needed. And then we have to look at long-term planning. What is available to the parties once they get divorced to plan for their futures, especially if someone is nearing retirement, whether you have one income earner or two income earners. If you have a long-term marriage, if you have like approaching a 20-year marriage, and someone isn't retired yet, but retirement may be on the horizon, maintenance will have to be negotiated, most likely, if it's a primary breadwinner. And the issue of that person retiring will also have to be taken into account. In Illinois, someone is not required to, you're allowed to retire. So depending upon various facts and circumstances, the breadwinner, if there's just one breadwinner, is not going to be required to work indefinitely, into their 80s in order to pay maintenance. There will have to be an exit strategy for that, at which time both parties will be living off of their financial assets. So those are all things that we have to consider. With respect to maintenance, I don't want to dive into too many details, but for those of you who maybe have questions about maintenance, there are a couple of factors that every maintenance candidate needs to be aware of. There's the amount of maintenance, obviously. There's the duration of maintenance. And then there is whether or not the maintenance can be modifiable. And all of those things are negotiated, usually between counsel in a mediation session and settlement conference, if you're in court in a pretrial conference. And then there is termination of maintenance. In Illinois, there is a statute with a statutory formula for how long maintenance is to be paid. And 20 years, if your marriage is 20 years, the statute calls it indefinite maintenance. That term is very misleading. It's not indefinite. It's indefinite until someone comes in and says, I'm retiring, or I'm no longer able to pay because I'm not working anymore. So indefinite is a little bit of a tricky term. If you've heard someone say that before, like I got indefinite maintenance, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to just pay out over their lifetime. So I think that's all on this slide. Maggie, you can go to the next one. So the emotional aspect of a case, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And this is my overall advice for the emotional, dealing with the emotional aspect of the case, because, I see there are different emotions in a gray divorce, because usually what I see, this is a little bit stereotypical, so, I acknowledge that, but usually in these longer term marriages, what I see from the wives is that there is sometimes a sense of, I am finally going to be able to make my own decisions and have a little bit of freedom in my life. But there also is a little bit of a sense of, I've given the best years of my life to raising my family. And, now it's my turn. What I see when I represent the husbands in a long-term marriage is there's a little bit of a sense of, well, I worked my whole career for this family and to give this family the financial security that, you know, I've given, and now I'm kind of watching my retirement plan implode because, you know, we're going to have to support 2 separate households in retirement. And both of these narratives are correct. And the one thing I say to clients in any divorce, not just a older couple getting divorced, is your emotions are your own and you're entitled to them, and they're not right or wrong. They are just yours. You just have to get the support mechanisms in place for you to deal with them. So the lawyer's role in, you know, helping clients through the emotional aspect of a case is to try to educate and separate them. And, you know, you do that through providing them an opportunity to get support if they don't have it, via other emotional support mechanisms such as licensed therapists, divorce coaches, and you know, things of that nature. But then I also try to drill down with my clients, what are your goals and concerns? And help educate them on what the process allows for them to undertake. So the collaborative process really focuses on goals and concerns, and the mediation process does as well, just not as formally. So the reason we do goals and concerns is because when parties are able to drill down into what they really want to accomplish, sometimes that can help soothe the emotional aspect of the negotiation. It doesn't leave. It just puts it in a place where it's not always bubbling up to the top. Also, choosing the right process is critical. In her introduction, Maggie talked about the fact that I have litigated for 20 years and I'm moving my practice into a different direction right now. And, you know, I could probably talk for an hour on why that is. But what I think is really important to understand is just that the dispute resolution process, whether it's collaborative law or mediation or some hybrid of those two, really allows the couple to be in charge of the process. So you're not turning over your case and your family to someone in a black robe that is going to make a decision. And, you know, we always talk about getting to an agreement that everyone can live with. It may not be your you know, this is what I really want to feel like I really got what I deserved, but it's something that you can live with. And at the end of the day, it will be better than something that you could get in court, because judges tend to do a little bit more of a cookie cutter approach because they simply don't have time to give every case the resources that lawyers and mediators can do. And I'll just end on this, but the other thing that I would say is it's important to understand in the process that each party is bringing in a significant amount of emotional luggage, given the length of the marriage. So sometimes when you're dealing with shorter term marriages, there may be 1 or 2 things that are really getting under people's skin. It may be, you know, there may have been one inciting incident to why the divorce is happening. Usually with longer term marriage, there's some pretty complex emotional things going on, and you know, the lawyers need to not understand it in a way that a therapist and mental health professional would, but understand it in a way to know how to provide support so people can get to the right people that they need. Okay, Maggie, go ahead to the next slide. Practical tips. You can skip this one and go to the next one. Practical tips. So the biggest question that I always get when people are older and they don't know if they should get divorced is this question: can I afford to get divorced? Should I do it? A lot of women will say to me, well, I don't know if I should do it. Should I just hang in here? I mean, you know, we've got a pretty complex estate. You know, I have no idea. How do I know? Can I afford to get divorced? So usually if someone is coming to me at that stage and they haven't decided, I just say, you've got to start gathering information. That is absolutely critical to you, especially if you don't have your hands on information. Now, you may have a financial planner or an accountant that can start getting you that information. You need to look into like what your health insurance options are. You know, if you get divorced and your husband still has insurance through his company, you probably have the option of 36 months of COBRA. However, how much does that cost? We all know that COBRA is really expensive, and there may be some more affordable options that are not bad insurance plans just out in the private market. And the one thing that I always ask people is at the very beginning is, do you know how much is coming in and going out every month? Do you have a net worth statement? Those two things right there, if they don't know what's coming in and going out and they don't have a net worth statement, that's what we have to start developing, because it's hard for anyone to give you advice on the, can I afford to get divorced, if you don't really know what your expenses are and you don't really know what your net worth is and what your liabilities are and what your assets are. So it's really important to lean on your trusted advisors. So if you do have people in place, you need to, you know, kind of hit them up for information. That's what they're there for, and to help you. I will say, this is kind of a personal note of opinion, but I do think sometimes when there is a long-term financial planning relationship and possibly the husband has the relationship with the financial planner and the wife is invited to the annual meetings and participates in the discussion, but it's really the husband that has the relationship, I do think it's important for the wife to get her own planner that's working in the background. This doesn't have to be someone that goes head to head with lawyers and the current financial planner, but it's someone that she and the lawyer can bounce ideas off of, and that person can help with the negotiations by running different types of projections. So in terms of what trusted advisors do you need to add, you would talk with your lawyer about that really early on and start putting together your team. Typically, you want a financial planner. You may need your own accountant, a health insurance consultant. You may need things like a mortgage counselor if you want to keep the house and you have to figure out how will you qualify for a mortgage. If you're going to be downsizing. Some couples going through a gray divorce say, we've raised our family in this house. We don't need this big house anymore. We're going to sell it and divide the proceeds. You may need a realtor to help you find a good, downsized living arrangement. So you want to, bottom line, you want to gather information and put together your team, and your team will help you kind of with that, developing that budget. And Maggie, you can go to the next slide. The one thing I do want to say is whether or not you can afford to get divorced means different things to everyone. And I've just listed some examples here of, well, what does that mean to you? Can you afford to get divorced? Do you want everything to stay the same? You want your lifestyle to stay the same? You want absolutely no changes to your expenses, your home? That is something different than someone who says, no, I mean, I'd downsize, I would adjust my expenses. So you have to start prioritizing. Prioritizing is really important when you're going through a divorce or contemplating a divorce, because you have to kind of start walking yourself through those options. A retirement date could be a really significant thing. And I do see that in gray divorces sometimes, is a divorce can delay retirement, because someone needs to keep working in order to accumulate more assets, because it costs more to support two households than just one. So when retirement assets get divided, if you think about it in like someone may have $1.5 million in retirement. If a couple stays married, that could be a significant amount of retirement that could carry them through for several years. When you divide that up into $750,000, suddenly that number looks a lot smaller. So that is a significant analysis that has to be done for older couples going through a divorce, and making sure that those retirement assets can last, and, you know, taking into account when those retirement assets are going to have to start being used in terms of providing income and assets for the couple. You know, there also may be some history of philanthropic giving. Some parties may want to some parties may actually have an estate plan already in place with generation skipping trusts to provide for grandchildren. They may have made promises for contributing to grandchildren's college education. You know, there may just be different things that they have already set up, and all of that is going to have to be reviewed, because when you get divorced, you no longer have joint estate plans because your legal status has changed. So when you get divorced, your assets become your own and your sole and separate property, and you can bequeath them as you see fit. So post-divorce, you're going to need an estate planning attorney to help you decide how you want to pass down your wealth, whether it is to children, to grandchildren, or to philanthropy. So Maggie, you can go to the next slide. So these are just some intangibles of a gray divorce. These are kind of some of the things that come up during a gray divorce that may not necessarily come up in every divorce. I've already talked about you don't have to worry about major parenting issues. There's less question marks with respect to finances because most of the earning has occurred or is getting ready to wrap up. So we're not having to project things like, well, what if so-and-so earns this? What would child support be set at? Most of the time we're looking forward to not an infinite period of time, but we're trying to get people, maybe it is to retirement, maybe it's to a certain age. So everything is kind of looking forward in a gray divorce. I've seen that people sometimes get very empowered because this is kind of the first time they've been able to think about themselves in a really long time. They're just focused on them. They've raised their children have jobs, they're you know, employed, they've done their job, and now they're just thinking about themselves, and they're thinking about reimagining their life. And that can, for a woman, that can be a really empowering, wonderful thing to watch. And I did have a client who coined this term that I use frequently now, family 2.0. When you have grown children, as opposed to younger children, when you get divorced, you know, they are still going to be affected and they're going to still be upset, but there is an opportunity to create a new family structure for them and for grandchildren that if you get divorced the right way, everyone will still be able to go to weddings and graduations and be able to be in the same room. And then there's also just the chance to have process with dignity. And that occurs in all divorces. But I find that that is really important to people who have been in long-term marriages. Most of the time they're aligned with really wanting to come up with a process, whether it's mediation or collaborative law, that gives them an opportunity. They've created a wonderful family and they don't want to just, you know, kind of burn it all down in litigation. They want to be able to move on and, you know, live out their golden years with a restructured family rather than, you know, just fighting. And one more slide, Maggie. I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a notation and acknowledgement that, you know, it's sometimes you're not the one that wants the divorce, or someone that you care about is not the one that wants the divorce, and they're kind of finding themselves feeling a little bit blindsided. And so, you know, as an attorney, it is so important to honor that and meet the client where they are. And if someone just feels blindsided and they're really upset, I'm not going to start talking about like empowering them right away. I've got to get them support. So I've got to make sure that they're getting the mental health support they need and the financial support they need. There are some great support groups out there, and I always say friends and family are great. Use them as friends and family. They are not experts. And it is so common and reasonable, and I understand people talk to their friends who have been divorced. What did you get? How much maintenance are you getting? How much, you know, retirement did you get? And I always say to people, use your friends and your family to support you, not to tell you what you should be getting, because no one really knows your situation. And so I said I was going to talk a little bit about Bill and Melinda Gates, and this is where I'm going to do it. I saw a report. There's a report everywhere. Every news outlet has some alleged insight into their settlement. But what I did hear this morning was they actually negotiated their entire, it sounds like what they did was they negotiated their entire settlement last year. They signed all the paperwork and then filed, which is what I encourage a lot of my clients to do, because that way you file and you get divorced. You've already done the work rather than having to kind of linger out there and proceed in court. No one is ever going to know what Bill and Melinda Gates' divorce really is. That is a private, confidential document. I'm sure there are tons of non-disclosure agreements. So we could sit here and we could talk about it, but you know, we don't really know. Every case is different, whether it's Bill and Melinda Gates or it's a small estate with a family of four that are living paycheck to paycheck. Every single divorce case has different facts. So really important to get the right people in place, really important to make sure the right support mechanisms are set up. Really important to use good expert advice. I see people come back to me post-judgment that did not use divorce attorneys in order to save a few bucks, or only one person got a lawyer in order to save a few bucks. And a lot of times those problems develop because of that. It is really important to do it right the first time, get the right professionals involved, get the right advice. You may pay a little bit more, that's correct, but hopefully you don't have follow-up problems down the road. And then it's really important to decide on a process that is best for your family. I'm an advocate of dispute resolution, so you don't need to go to court. It's confidential. It usually moves quicker and is less costly. Not always, but on the whole, it does. And I always tell people to keep the long game in mind. And a lot of times emotions can really flare up when you're thinking about negotiations. You may not like where the negotiations start off. You just got to keep the long game in mind. What are you looking at? What are your goals? Don't get caught up in kind of the emotional roller coaster of the everyday negotiation. Just kind of keep the long game in mind, because that at the end of the day, you end up with a document. It's like it's a contract between the two spouses as to how the estate is going to be divided and if maintenance is going to be paid. That is the ultimate end game, is to get a document that everyone is comfortable with. So you've just got to keep that in mind as the end process. And I think that's it.
Wow, Michelle, that was amazing information. Just great information. And we love how we always talk about a team, because you really do need that team. And Purse Strings works to get all those different kind of professionals, because we know getting divorced, you need all these people, which you even listed more people than I thought you even needed. When you said healthcare, I was like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. You'd have to, do all these different things. So that was great.
Thank you. Hopefully it was helpful for people that are considering or know someone that just has a lot of questions.
We do have some questions for you. Is there, what is the average length of time for a divorce?
So in Cook County, now this is pre-pandemic, in Cook County, where I mostly am, litigation, the average case in Cook County takes 2 years when it goes through the court system. So wow. That's pre-pandemic. But that was kind of what we were told, the average case. Now that means that some cases are much shorter, and some cases unfortunately are longer. Right. I can tell you the mediation and the collaborative cases, we get those done in under a year usually. That usually is, but they widely vary. Mm-hmm. So I can tell you 2 to 3 months for a divorce case. Very, very quick. That is a very, very quick, whether it's mediation or collaborative. I would probably say you're more like 6 months to maybe 9 months, approaching a year. The complexity of the issues dictates. The other thing that dictates is a case, whether it's in court or in dispute resolution, really moves as fast as the slowest person. And so that is something that is a challenge to navigate when one person is like been thinking about it and is far ahead and is like, let's get started dividing up the assets, and the other person is left like deer in headlights. I can't even believe this is happening. So that person, we have to bring them along.
Right.
You got to get them to the point, because court takes a while, and so in the court process, people gradually kind of get to that place eventually because it takes so long. But when you're doing like a dispute resolution model, we've got to get them there because that's all voluntary. So if they're feeling blindsided and hurt and don't have enough information to make a deal, I can't move that quicker than they're ready to get there.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's always you got to bring that person with. Right. So I know you mentioned to make like a divorce process faster, maybe did like Bill and Melinda did of just separating and then going. But what are other things that couples can help themselves make the process easier? So the biggest thing, and this is hard, like you're going to laugh when I say this, but obviously, the quicker you agree, the quicker everyone can kind of get you guys through the process. So I do counsel people on, everyone comes in sometimes thinking like, oh, we're going to agree. And I always say, I think you probably will agree. And I think we probably will get this done. But I don't want you to think that it's going to get done without, it's hard. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to have issues. So what can you do to kind of speed it up and lower your costs at the same time is kind of what I talked about in the gathering the information. The more information that the couple has in terms of net worth, expenses, and income is so helpful. Because a lot of times when there's one party that just doesn't know a whole lot, or sometimes both parties don't know a lot because they've got a financial planner and they've got an accountant and they're farming all of that stuff out, and then they may not know. It takes, the lawyers have to like get up to speed and educate both of them. So the more they know, the easier it will be. And then the other thing I would say is I think it's always good when spouses talk to each other about potential settlement options. One thing I will say is I usually tell people, I said, that's fine to have those conversations because I think those can kind of be helpful in getting information flowing back and forth about what each of them is concerned about and what they want to make sure that they get. But I do caution people to not, and I'm still surprised, even to this day, people will come to me and say, well, so-and-so wanted me to sign this document. I'm like, don't sign anything. Like, it's one thing to have a conversation, but don't start like dividing up accounts or, I did have one couple who started dividing up accounts before either of them had talked to lawyers, and it ended up kind of being a disaster because they thought that they were moving the process along, but they didn't realize they were selling businesses, and it kind of just, they made it more difficult on themselves, unfortunately. Right. There is a process there, so it does have to be followed. And then, so if someone were to work with you, is your divorce considered more like mediation?
So, I do everything. I mean, I do everything, but I'm trying to move my practice more into the dispute resolution. So those are two main areas. One is collaborative law, and I'm a collaborative law fellow, and that's a team approach. And you actually sign a participation agreement, which contractually obligates everyone to not go to court. And to settle within the team process. And there's a very specific process for that. And we vet people and make sure that they're, well-suited, a well-suited couple for collaborative. We don't sign that willy-nilly. If it's a little bit like, well, we really are trying to settle, but we may need to go to court, mediation is a great option. And there's a couple of different types of mediation. But a really effective form of mediation is attorney-assisted mediation. So 2 lawyers attend mediation with the parties. And what's effective about that is the lawyers are there to advise upon the law. The mediator is facilitating the conversation and running the show, but the lawyers are there. And then when it comes time to drafting, the lawyers have been in the room. So the drafting process usually goes much quicker. And then parties can go to mediation just with a mediator without lawyers and reach an agreement, and then the lawyers draft the document. And sometimes that works. That works when you have much more limited issues and a very, very simple estate, and there isn't going to be any drafting required. But most mediators require the parties to have attorneys that they can go back to and get advice, because as you can imagine, in a divorce mediation, it's hard. The mediator cannot give legal advice. So
interesting. Yeah. Well, this has been a ton of great information today, Michelle. I feel like people can feel really empowered going into the situation now. I mean, it's not always picture perfect, but
never is picture perfect, and that's
knowledge is power.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. You just have to just, you know, kind of decide on your process and get everything together. It's not hopeless. That's the main message.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. You can always reach Michelle at malfamilylaw.com. And she is the owner of the law office of Michelle A. Lawless, LLC. And she's also one of our wonderful Purse Strings approved providers. So you can always find Michelle on our website at pursestrings.co. So thank you again, Michelle. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks so much for having me.